Here are the three audio tape formats that most people remember. First, reel-to-reel tape, also known as open reel tape, containing a single spool of tape which you need to manually thread onto a separate take-up reel. Next, 8-track tape, containing a single endless loop of tape inside a plastic cartridge. And finally, cassette tape, containing two miniature reels of tape within a plastic cassette shell. But there were certainly other formats along the way which did have some degree of commercial success but just didn't have the same staying power as the top three, one of which was the 4-track cartridge, also known as the Muntz Stereo Pack, which you may notice bears a striking resemblance to the 8-track. If you want to know the complete history of the 4-track stereo pack, I suggest you watch the excellent video by Techmoan, but in a nutshell, it was a 4-track endless loop tape cartridge format introduced in 1962 by Earl Madman Muntz and was briefly popular in the mid-1960s in car stereos, but basically disappeared by 1970 because it was superseded by the 8-track. The 4-track and 8-track cartridges are so similar in outward appearance that you may wonder why that didn't lead to a massive patent infringement lawsuit. Well, that's because they were both based on the pre-existing Fidelipac cartridge format used by radio stations and simply referred to as the cart. In fact, some 4-track cartridges use the same clear plastic shell as the cart, so they are physically identical. The difference is in the speed and track layout of the tape. The Fidelipac cartridge format, aka the cart, is an endless loop of 1/4-inch tape. Most carts run at 7.5 inches per second and contain either 2 or 3 tracks for either mono audio plus a Q-tone track or left and right stereo audio plus a Q-tone track. And there were several larger sizes of carts, but this was the smallest and most common size for jingles, station IDs, and single songs. And likewise, there were several larger sizes of 4-track stereo pack cartridges, but this was the smallest and most common size, good for fitting one album of music. And it runs at 3 3/4 inches per second, half the speed of the broadcast cartridge. And as its name suggests, it uses 4 tracks for 2 pairs of left and right stereo programs, conveniently allowing it to replicate the 2 sides of a phonograph record. As this 4-track cartridge says, contents equal 1 complete long play record. 8-track cartridges use the same 1/4-inch tape and 3 3/4 inches per second speed as 4-track cartridges. The 2 main differences are that the tape is now split up into 8 tracks comprising 4 stereo programs. And also, whereas with the 4-track cartridge, the pintroller is in the machine and is swung into position by a lever through this hole into the cartridge when you begin to play it, on the 8-track, the pintroller is built into the cartridge, not in the machine. The tape cutouts are almost identical, and yes, both have the same disintegrating foam pads that you'll need to replace, but the 8-track has a built-in pintroller while the 4-track does not. They are so similar that you can even put a 4-track cartridge into an 8-track player, and it'll fit, but it just won't play. So you think somebody could come up with an adapter to make it work. And that's exactly what a company called Automatic Radio did in 1967 when they invented the Gidget, the gadget that turns all 4-track stereo cartridges into 8s. The ad says, for a long time there has been heated discussion in the stereo tape cartridge industry about the differences between 4 and 8-track stereo cartridges. Gidget is the answer. Through the use of Automatic Radio's exclusive and patented engineering masterpiece, the Gidget, your customers can play any 4-track stereo tape cartridge in an 8-track tape player. Unique in its simplicity, the Gidget can be inserted into the 4-track stereo tape cartridge in a matter of seconds. As Billboard magazine described it in May 1967, the device consists of a small plate and a roller that fits into the hole in the 4-track cartridge, which accommodates the pop-up pinch roller. The Gidget's pinch roller converts the 4-track cartridge to 8-track player use. The Gidget had a suggested retail price of $3.98, and they hoped to make it as ubiquitous as the 45 RPM adapter for phonographs. One thing that was never explained is why they called it the Gidget. Perhaps it was inspired by the series of novels, movies, and TV sitcom called Gidget, or perhaps Gidget was the name of the daughter of somebody who worked for the company. But the hopes of an inexpensive adapter enabling 4 tracks and 8 tracks to coexist in the marketplace, like LPs and 45s, did not come to fruition, as the already paltry sales of 4-track cartridges continued to decline. 4-track cartridges were a little bit cheaper than 8 tracks, and Muntz insisted that they sound better too, saying that 8 tracks are like running 8 cars down a 4-lane highway together, but the difference wasn't enough to sway consumers. Consumers favored the greater convenience of hearing any one of 4 different songs at the touch of a button, instead of having to wait 15 or 20 minutes for their favorite song to come around again. In a last-ditch attempt to shift the stock of 4-track cartridges, some came with a Gidget-type adapter pre-installed, and stickers plastered all over them, insisting they were playable in 8-track players. The last reference I can find to the Gidget was in 1973, when you can get an automatic radio 8-track tape player in FM radio, which was advertised as being able to play 4-track tapes with the Gidget for $59.99. These days, your chances of finding an original Gidget adapter are pretty slim. Like any small, inexpensive item, it was destined to become disposable once it was no longer needed. And the few that do show up for sale command high prices. For those of you who say that 3D printing is always the solution for making a replacement for any part that is no longer available, this time you're right, because that's exactly what the folks at 8-Track Avenue have done to create a new version of the Gidget. And here is that new 3D printed Gidget adapter. Most of the cost is in this rubber roller, because if you ever try to get one for an idler wheel drive turntable, you'll know you can spend $25 on just the roller alone, so I think the price is justified. And while I was at it, for another $4.50 I got a lifetime supply of replacement foam pads for Muntz cartridges. Some of the cartridges use the same pads as 8-track tapes, which I already have, but some of them use these smaller pads. The 8-Track Avenue website has an instructional video on how to use the adapter, but it's very simple. As long as the cartridge has this metal wire in it, you just hook it underneath that wire and it snaps into place. And now that adapter will allow this cartridge to be played in an 8-track machine. I'll just need to replace these disintegrating foam pads first. And to remove the adapter, you just push down on the pinch roller until it pops out, and that's it. Some 4-track cartridges are super easy to open because there's just one screw in the middle of the label, then the cover easily pops open. This one is dated the 34th week of 1967, and it uses those smaller pads that 8-Track Avenue sells for Muntz cartridges. And you just replace those pads and put the cover back on, and you're all set. And some use these spring-loaded felt pads, just like you see in some 8-track tapes, which generally don't disintegrate, but can fall off and get lost, in which case you'll need to replace those as well. And some 4-track cartridges are built exactly like 8-tracks, including various hidden plastic clips holding the shell together, which I prefer not to try to disassemble for fear of breaking it. So instead I just use a hook to pull out a small loop of tape, like that. Then clean out the remnants of the old disintegrating foam and shove the new pads in underneath the tape with a little bit of glue to hold them in place, and in my experience that works perfectly fine. But the one remaining catch is that not all 4-track cartridges have this notch in them, which is what 8-track players use to hold the tape against the capstan. They have a spring-loaded arm which fits into this notch and holds the cartridge in place so that it makes proper contact. At least in theory. In actual practice, it was not uncommon for the tape to slip, and people would resort to jamming in a matchbook and with a little bit of cajoling, they'll get it to play. But this 4-track cartridge does have the notch, so if the Gidget installed and the foam pads replaced, we're all ready to stick it in an 8-track player and see what happens.
What's the place from penthouse to the cellar?
And it plays. And the only difference you'll notice right away versus playing an 8-track is that 2 of the programs are repeats.
But they found it belonged to someone.
1 and 2 are the same.
Oh, and Mrs. Fitch. They were green, they were ambitious.
And 3 and 4 are the same. Otherwise, it plays perfectly normally.
Oh, the leet. Where or how she lost it. She owned the young, the attractive, and the rich.
Now this one does not have the notch, but nonetheless I'll try it with the Gidget installed and see what happens. It only works if I hold it in place. I think that's the end of the song. Yep. So it works, you just have to hold it in place. 8-Track Avenue recommends taping the Gidget in place if installing it into a cartridge that's missing this spring-loaded metal wire. Well, I recommend doing that anyway because when installing it in this cartridge, which has a plastic equivalent of that metal wire, it worked fine going in, but coming out, it came loose, requiring me to take the cover off the machine to get it out without breaking it. So I think you really should tape this in place, regardless of the type of cartridge you install it in. It's not pretty, but I used a combination of melting, cutting, and filing to add a little notch to this cartridge in the same location as the official notch. It's not nearly as deep or wide, but I think it might just work. I already have the Gidget installed and taped in place, so it won't fall out again. So let's stick it in and see what happens. That's a success to me. I did the same thing with this one because without a label on it, there's actually no way to tell whether this is a 4-track or a broadcast cart. It was made by Fidelipac, but they made a lot of cartridges for the 4-track system as well as broadcast carts. And this did have a label on it at one time, but all that's left now is a little bit of glue residue. So there's no way to tell unless I cut a hole in it, pop in the Gidget, tape it in place, and try it out. If it plays at half speed and the tracks don't line up, it's a broadcast cart, and if it just plays normally, it's a 4-track. So let's pop it in and find out. Sounds like it's a 4-track. Sounds pretty good too. Just one other difference is that 4-tracks don't have automatic program change. So when you get to the end of the program, you'll need to manually switch it. I think that was just a splice right there. And there it begins.
There we go. I told you about my being refined.
I'm sure 99% of the people watching this don't have any 4-track cartridges and probably have never even seen one before because that heated rivalry between 4-track and 8-track only lasted for a few years here in the US before 8-track decisively won, while most of the rest of the world ignored both formats and just started putting cassette players in their car a decade before we did. But if you do have any 4-track cartridges, this new Gidget adapter will let you play them in your 8-track player, although some cutting and alteration may be required. just like those parts you got at AutoZone, which weren't quite as factory fit as the guy at the counter promised they would be. I discovered this mystery cart is the 1964 debut album by the Baja Marimba Band. So I'll leave you with as much of a direct hookup of it as I can get away with, played on this Craig 8-track deck using the new Gidget adapter.